If you're trying to commercialize a medical device that doesn't fit the traditional surgeon hospital model, or if you're navigating the messy world of reimbursement codes and market access, this episode is for you. I sat down with Courtney Turich. She spent 20 years in Medtech, started at Stryker where she was a top performer, left to start her own company that landed her a deal on Shark Tank with Mark Cuban, and is now the global VP of sales and marketing at Cooler Heads, where they help chemotherapy patients minimize hair loss. Today, you'll learn how selling into infusion centers differs from selling into surgical suites and who the real decision makers in those facilities are, what it takes to move from a Cat 3 to a Cat 1 reimbursement code, what it unlocks for your commercial strategy, and the single biggest thing holding most founders back from go-to-market success. I know you're going to love this episode, so without further ado, let's get into it. Courtney, thank you for joining us today on the Medtech Innovation Podcast. I'm really excited to have you on. We, again, kind of internet friends, was able to meet you, had like a really engaging first call. I love so much of the stuff that you've done in your career, but then also like what you're currently doing. Yeah, thanks for joining. Where does this podcast find you today?
Awesome. Well, hi, Spencer, and hello to your audience. I am honored to be here today. I am coming to you from Asheville, North Carolina, and excited to see what we uncover in this conversation.
That's right. So Courtney is the global VP of sales and marketing at Cooler Heads. We will dive into Cooler Heads, what they do, the amazing kind of mission and vision they have at their company. She spent time at Stryker. She spent time at large medtech companies, smaller medtech companies, non-medtech companies, right? And then supporting medtech companies. So I know we're going to have like a really awesome conversation here. So maybe just kind of starters, like, introduce the audience to kind of what makes Courtney, and kind of what motivates you, drives you, and we'll get into Cooler Heads kind of at the tail end of that.
Well, that's a big question in itself, Spencer. As you mentioned, I've been at big corporate, small corporate, med tech. I've been in the industry now, 25 plus years, which is crazy to say that out loud. Mm-hmm. But every step of the way, I have built foundations to get me where I am today. I started my career as Stryker, where I will tell you, I personally had a tremendous experience for myself. I was young. They gave me opportunity when I excelled and when I asked for what was next. So it allowed me to work through the different channels within the commercial organization. Like many individuals, I started, as an ASR. I was termed a sales engineer in the day at a startup division of Stryker, which allowed me to still have a little bit of a startup energy to it, but then worked my way up to sales, went in-house for marketing as a product manager for the orthopedic product line for their navigation system. It gave me the ability to travel worldwide, talk to surgeons and interact with engineers, different levels that I had never experienced before, but then really found my passion out in the field in the sales capacity. So I moved around divisions of Stryker, left Stryker for a period and started my own company, which was featured on Shark Tank. Did a little innovation, had nothing to do in the medical industry. It was so super simple. And then at the end of the day, Spencer, I realized, truth be told, I wasn't going to walk away from Shark Tank being a millionaire.
Yeah.
As much as I wanted to. So when I came back into med device, I told myself I would only work for med tech startups because that fueled my entrepreneurial spirit. Anyone out there has been part of a startup, you wear many hats, right? Yeah. There no titles mean nothing in a startup world. So I really like that cowgirl feel of a startup. Yeah. And I've really just stayed the course since then now, which has led me to Cooler Heads, which we help minimize hair loss for chemotherapy patients.
Yeah, that's awesome. But before we jump into Cooler Heads, maybe just for a bit, like, you did really well at Stryker. I think you were like number one in your number one territory or number one division or something like that. But like, what was one of the biggest things? A lot of people say like, oh, that's just big company stuff. Like they've got this, they've got those resources, whatever. Like how applicable is that to startup stuff? But like, I honestly couldn't disagree more. Like, obviously, there's things that you may have at a big company or like, doors that get opened, right? Because you're part of that large organization. But at the end of the day, like the hard skills of selling and the practices and the tactics and stuff are like, that goes with you anywhere. I don't care if you're selling like widgets or transmissions or, whatever it is, medical devices, right?
Right.
What are some of the bigger things that you're looking back and you're like, I developed X, Y, or Z or these are the things that I think made me or my team with me leading them really effective when I was at Stryker.
Yeah. As you mentioned, while we have the tools of having doors opened with the Stryker name, like that is invaluable, Spencer. However, when you get in front of those surgeons or those key decision makers, you still have to be at the top of your game.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go in there and still present yourself that you were the expert in your space and that you can build the sales reasoning behind why you're speaking to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
The name recognition gets you so far, but you still have to take yourself to that next level.
Yeah.
I will tell you, when I started with Stryker, I was still one of the very few females within the company, at least in the division I was in. And that right there is a roadblock. And we've heard it before, but I remember going back to that day. I felt like I had to work extra hard to make sure that I knew my product.
Yeah.
I knew how to build that rapport with respect with those male surgeons.
Yeah.
Right. And then once I built that and they trusted me, the doors began to open. I could have those honest conversations. It taught me to speak up and share my voice and not hide behind, I can't say that. It might not be the right thing. But when you start to build up those relationships, your voice does have power.
Yeah. I know with cooler heads, like, there's probably still overlap in terms of like, you may not be selling to surgeons as much, right? But you're still selling to physicians, right? Or physicians are still involved in that process. But over the past 10 years, are there things that you key on and like when you're looking at how the selling environment and I guess purchasing environment on the other side, right? How that environment has changed and like what different approaches it takes to be successful in this kind of evolved environment.
Right. And it's definitely evolved, thinking 20 plus years back, just having a surgeon champion got your product in the door. Yeah. That's not the case anymore. That is one component of many of the people that you have to sell or get their approval in the process to get your product anywhere in this day and age. Champion, yes, critical. However, you have to wear multiple hats and be able to speak to different people within the facility. So who else is involved? Like for our product, it's not only an oncologist. We have directors of the cancer care. We also have nurse navigators, people who touch that patient that also have to have that they have to talk to the patient. So they have to have buy-in to the process. So long are the days of one person getting you into a facility. And still, I believe every facility, their process is a little different to get in. So you have to go in, and the sooner you can find out those key people to drive your sales process further, the better you are without spinning your wheels. And we've learned that the hard way at Cooler Heads too. I think any startup does until you really define who are those key people to help you get your product to where it needs to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. The surgeon wanting it is kind of like the price of admission these days, it seems like. And there's just a lot of other like extraneous factors, and that's one of the reasons too, like you really have to be focused and like very intentional about the accounts that you go after, especially when like you can't afford to just spin your wheels in certain accounts for a long time. Like you have to know like, hey, like, is this going to be a really difficult 12 to 18 month sales cycle in this account? And not saying you abandon that, but like you only have so much time in the day. Your sales reps only have so much time in the day. So like, are you going to focus on them, or are you going to focus on some that you think you can get through quicker? And then, like you said, like every organization's different. Some of the best sales reps that I've seen, and these can be like W-2s or 1099s, like have these skills, like the good ones, right? Where, it's not just like, oh, I'm hitting, I'm going to try to call on this surgeon at this facility today or whatever. And they just go in there and they try to like get through the doors and whatever, just to like, go find that surgeon. Like they know the, scheduling coordinator, they know like the purchasing executive assistant person that sits up at that window, and like they really kind of control the flow of who gets in and like what stuff gets pushed to like the actual purchasing manager's desk quickly, right? Like there's all these little nuances, and the really, really good reps, they know those people, right? And they know how to build trust and relationships with those people. So like when they say they're going to go try to hit an account, like there's like 4 wins that they could have, 5 wins that they could have, right? Like maybe the surgeon's busy and all they do is just go in and build some rapport and get some intel working with, purchasing manager assistant, OR surgery scheduling, right? Or whoever else, right? So I think like those types of skills and kind of like mapping the accounts from like maybe not decision makers, but key people is really, really valuable. So I do want to ask more about cooler heads.
Sure.
So I'm very familiar with it. It's just like so awesome. And it's also one of those things that just seems, you have these products and it's like, this seems, simple in application, but like, or straightforward in application. Maybe the way that you're doing it, I think is really unique and more complex, but it just makes sense, right? It makes sense, but also there's like this great mission behind it. So like, why don't you tell us more about cooler heads, and would love to also know like kind of when and how you got involved with the organization.
Of course. So I've been with Cooler Heads a little over almost 4 years now, which is wild to say that. So I joined a pre-commercialization. I was consulting with my mentor, Ryan Denny, and we came in to build the commercialization strategy after FDA clearance. And when I first heard about Cooler Heads, and Spencer, I feel bad to say this out loud, but I want to be honest with everyone. And that is when I heard about the technology, which again, we help minimize hair loss during chemotherapy. I was like, I'm not going to worry about that. If that would happen to me, and shame on me, I have never, knock on wood, had someone close go through chemotherapy in my life, which I know is rare to say that this day and age. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's okay. I know it's going to take extra time for me to scalp cool. I'll just rock a bandana. Until I started to hear patient stories, until I started to think about what I do when I see somebody at the grocery store that doesn't have hair, and you can tell it's very obvious that they're going through chemo. Mm-hmm. And when I thought about when I see someone at the grocery store, I immediately tell myself, oh, I feel bad for them. Mm-hmm. I hope they're okay. Oh, I'm sending them love. Well, no one wants to feel that way.
Yeah.
Right? If you're sick, these individuals, men and women, just want normalcy in their life. So by us helping them to minimize hair loss during chemotherapy, it allows them to go out and live in the world, to go feel normal and tell their illness on their terms when they're ready. So what does scalp cooling do? It basically it's a cold cap. It's a mechanical cold cap. So basically it fits on the patient's scalp and it circulates cold fluid, which then freezes off the hair follicles from the chemotherapy to penetrate in and kill off the hair follicles. Very simple in nature. It does require extra time at the infusion center. So there's a pre-cooling phase for the patient. They'll cool during their chemo injection, and then they have a post-cool of 2 to 3 hours, depending on which chemo regimen. Yeah. Because all chemos react differently within our bodies. You have different hair type than I do, Spencer. So it's not as simple to just say everybody's going to have the same results. Yeah. Because there's so many variables with hair loss.
Yeah. No, but that's really interesting. And so, so this would be like, primarily this is at a chemotherapy infusion center. And I want to say like, this is like such an incredible mission. I remember seeing my grandma who had, it was breast cancer. And I remember like, I was like walking past like, where she was staying at our house. And this was like in the last couple of years of her life. And like seeing her without her wig on. And it was like frankly, it was just kind of jarring to see your grandma like that. I was very young, right? So it was just, right. But it also like, being able to preserve that for people is really powerful. So I just wanted to say that because I am going to dig into like some of the less like kind of empathetic, just like tactics and mechanics of the stuff. So it's outpatient infusion setting. So you're going there, it's a couple hours to get a chemotherapy treatment. And you guys have kind of is there a capital equipment and then there's a reusable element to it, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And then I know you guys got like a dedicated reimbursement code, right? And it is predicated around that model of like they buy X piece of equipment and that's reused on every patient, but there's or reused with every patient in conjunction with the disposable elements. And that's, kind of the nexus for how the reimbursement, I would say, is that correct? And then like, I'd love to unpack, or if you could unpack that reimbursement, the process or the strategy behind it. And then like maybe once it was received, like what that unlocked, how you leveraged it once you did get that, the reimbursement for that.
Sure. Very layered, Spencer, because we just walked into these category 1 codes this year in January 26. So before we were in a category 3 and have had that designation for the past, I would say 3 years. And that it's a very interesting business model that I've personally never experienced in medtech when I walked in. And scalp cooling, before, there's two other FDA cleared devices besides cooler heads. So we're the newest to market. And before we moved to category 1, there was a cash pay component for the patient where the patient could actually come to the company itself, so like cooler heads, and buy their cap from us, and we'd ship it to them. But the device would always be housed at the infusion center. So the infusion center would own the device, but then the patient would come in with their own cap and they'd just be able to plug into the system, right? So as we move into category 1, that whole model has changed because the category 1 code specifically requires now the facility to hand the disposable cap to the patient to use at their facility with their capital components, their cooler heads device, AMA.
Gotcha. And is it cold water? Is it like nitrogen cooled? Is it dry ice cooled? Like, I'm curious.
Yeah, for our device specifically, it is water, isopropyl alcohol, and ice.
Nice. Okay.
Some of the other systems require different things. There is a dry ice for more of the manual cold caps where people take caps off every 20 minutes off dry ice, which is very labor intensive. And then the other mechanical systems they have their own proprietary solutions.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I've kind of stumbled across, et cetera, really multiple devices where really, really valuable for the patient. It's usually, I would say, almost like kind of a secondary thing. Like it helps them with the care that they get in an inpatient or outpatient setting better, but it's not like a fundamental part of the treatment. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
It's this interesting problem to solve around, right? Like you're using it at X facility. The facility could technically buy it, right? They could send it home or they could reuse it with other patients, but then the patient could buy it themselves, right? And then there's sometimes a DME element to it, right? So I've seen like lots of those. And I think you guys did like one, for instance, I'll give her a shout out, Misty Staley. It's the free arm, right? So it's this really interesting, think like, like you've got like the mechanical mounts for things, but it's flexible. So it's like, you put it to a position, it's rigid, right? But it's one of those, but it's specifically designed for holding like peg tube feeding bags or bottles, right? And you can use it in the NICU, right? Which is where I think a lot of the use is. But like people of all ages get peg tube feedings, right? Inpatient, but then at home, obviously, right? Like you get sent home with this peg tube feeding, et cetera. And that can be elderly, that can be anybody that has to have peg tube feeding for whatever reason, as well as neonates, right? So they had to similarly be like, okay, we're going to sell to NICUs, but also like they could send it home. They could just keep reusing it. We can sell it direct to patients. There's a DME reimbursement. And then like assisting the patients around like letter of medical necessities, DME,
right?
Like all of that, right? So those things, like I'd honestly say like if you have something that's like that, like all of these words and concepts and models should be like so top of mind, whether it's like DME, letter of, medical necessity, the reimbursement, HCPCS codes, like around all of that stuff should really, really be top of mind because it's a huge part of your strategy.
Back to your point, Spencer, we are not a DME. And that was a big challenging process for us when we were in category 3, because the patients were coming us to buy their caps. A lot of people believe scalp cooling was a DME product, but it is not. It is a reimbursable product for the providers for their service. So as we walked into this year, knowing we were moving to that category 1, we got the final verdict end of Q4 last year. So when we got the word from CMS of what that specific requirement was for our facilities to apply these new codes, we started the education process. So at Cooler Heads, we did hire a consultant to help us come in and put together a presentation and what that communication would look like to our infusion centers. Many people in your audience know that we walk a fine line when you're talking about reimbursement and sales. So we had to be very dialed in, very specific that we're just providing this information. And now it's on the site's hands to figure out how they work through the process internally. As we were prepping into January, we did hire a VP of Market Access. She's incredible, Lori Sandberg. She's helped other startups move from category 3 to category 1. So her job is to now take those calls over with our customers, lay out the codes, provide the resources for our facilities. So our facilities now need a letter of medical, assess or
Mm-hmm.
recommendation.
Yeah.
We've hired a third party agency to come in to provide assistance for when authorizations get denied. So we
Mm-hmm.
have, that's a resource we provide for our facilities to really start pushing commercial payers to follow suit. And then Lori's also responsible for reaching out to those big insurance companies like Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and talking to them about adopting the codes and recognizing that Medicare has moved them to a category 1. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that providers and infusion centers get reimbursed for these codes. It's
Yeah.
not as black and white as we hope, right?
Yeah.
Or easy.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, it's also kind of one of the things that stuck out to me about that is like how that medical affairs almost treatment of like the market access and then like the coordination with the facilities on that. Like it seems like it, like in a perfect world, like I understand to some degree why it has that element to it, but it just seems like you guys should be able to help them more with that, right? Because they're having to deal with that for so many people. So like, it feels like a more hand in glove direct approach. Like you can still do it obviously above board, and like everybody, like, there's a lot of fraud that happens in the medical space and Medicare and all of that stuff. But I don't know. The other thing that stuck out to me is it almost seems like how in the world would there be a justification for denying coverage of a cool cap for a person that's going through like intravenous chemotherapy? Like it blows my mind. And I'm just like, would it not be less expensive on net to just reimburse these things and then have to pay people to deal with these denials and then appeals and all of that stuff? But I think that's kind of, you guys are probably making that case to them and saying, hey, this is just like, look at the rates, frequency, total reimbursed rates, all of these things. Like you guys denying this is probably costing you more money than just like having a blanket adopted approval of these things when they occur, because like the precursors before this thing can happen, right? Like hospice, I know there's a lot of fraud in hospice, right? Unfortunately, but this is not that, right? Like you have to be like actively being administered chemotherapy for this to even come into play, which seems like an incredibly high bar to clear for. Anyways, I know I'm like preaching to the converted here.
Yeah.
But like, it's just, it's one of the things that bugs me about insurance, like carriers and providers. But the last thing that I want to key on that you said, the term market access is like kind of vague and opaque to a lot of people, especially like, if your company has not had to like been in the trenches doing this type of work. But like, there are codes that exist, right? There's reimbursement pathways, but there's processes and kind of aggregation and presentation of data, and then a handling of applications, submissions, appeals, so on and so forth. Like the coordination between the company, you, and the provider and the payers, right? That is all market access, right? So when you have something that is not as easy as like, they use it, they bill for this code, for the CPT code for the procedure, and then this is automatically reimbursed because it's part of it, whatever. Like there are things that are simple, but think about market access. Like that's is that, what am I missing in that, I guess is the question here, in terms of my encapsulation of market access?
You're moving in the right direction, Spencer. It's very layered. So Lori, our market access VP, she is talking to not only the sales, she's talking to billing within the facility. She's talking to the site level nurses, the directors, but then she's taking all this back. For example, let's say, I'm just using this as an example, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Again, these new codes came into effect in January. Well, while they might cover scalp cooling, and not all, I'm not saying this is a blanket, this is an example.
Yeah.
But when you look down into the specifics, they're still using the old CPT-3 codes. Now somebody's got to call and try to navigate the process to get those codes updated. And to update things that are already published, from my understanding, is a headache in itself. It's not something that happens overnight. And then are you talking to the right person at that commercial insurance, at Blue Cross Blue Shield, that can make that change? So she's juggling a lot of balls in the air at once, right? She's making sure she's keeping my team out of trouble and not saying anything they shouldn't when it comes to reimbursement. Again, it's a sticky situation. These codes are written to be direct, but vague enough. And a lot of facilities want you to spell out what that code means, but we're not allowed to interpret for the facilities or those providers what those codes mean. That's a hard thing for a salesperson, right? Like think about it. You want to help your facilities, you want to help your providers, your patients, but our hands are tied. We can't tell them to decipher what that code stands for.
Yeah, that seems bonkers, but like I don't want
It
to
is.
I don't want to keep going in on it because it's going to get me frustrated. But
Yeah.
Anywho, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about this. So I know there was like a period of time, you mentioned this previously, where you started Monkey Mat and went through Shark Tank. I just like quick elevator just pitch just so the audience can like understand what Monkey Mat was or is. And then I have some questions about the Shark Tank thing specifically.
Of course. So Monkey Mat was a big 5 by 5 foot water repellent mat that stuffed into a itty bitty pouch so you could zip, clip, and go. So what was it used for? Parents who were traveling with young kids, you're at a sporting event, you're at a concert, you just want to throw something on the ground that you're not, getting your tush wet or a clean space. There you go. It was that simple. And I created it with someone that I met through the Stryker throughout my years at Stryker. And it was a fun ride.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm curious, like when you did the actual pitch, because I've heard different stuff. Like I've heard that when you actually go to do the Shark Tank pitch, that it's like a 2-hour presentation and then they cut it down to like, the, what is it, like 12.5 minute segment for TV that they, cut up, whatever. But then I've heard that it's shorter from different people, and they could have changed it over time because I talked to someone else that was on Shark Tank at one point. Just like high level on the process, like kind of leading up to the pitch, maybe like the, TV pitch, and then like what that TV pitch was like and kind of the aftermath. Like were they actually engaged, or was it just kind of like, hey, my people contact your people, will wire you the money, and then, good luck.
Yeah, it was a surreal experience, Spencer, and every emotion possible happens to you during this phase. And when you said the 2-hour window, it varies from entrepreneur to entrepreneur. They will never give you a set time frame when you're in the tank, but they will always say nothing's ever a guarantee. So every conversation you have at the very beginning, phone conversation, they always end it with, it's never a guarantee. So you do a lot of homework to even get to LA where it's filmed. And that was like a 3 or 4 month process for us to get to LA. And when we got to LA, they read to you for 2 hours. Now that was 2 hours with the attorneys scaring the crap out of you from basically speaking anything about Shark Tank, and you're going to be slapped a lawsuit. So that was one part I really remember. And then you get your call date, your call time. Again, nothing's a guarantee. So we got our call time. We were there for a week. On your day, they scurry you into a trailer on the studio site, and basically you just wait to be called in. Keep in mind, all these people working the set are on union. So they have to take scheduled breaks. They have to stop the day at a certain time. So the later you go in the day, the chances of you getting in front of the sharks get smaller and smaller. So I will tell you, we were at the end of the day. We got our call time at 4:30. So when we went in there, we were one of the last of the day. So they wanted to get in and out. I think we were in there for 30 to 45 minutes. I honestly didn't know if we'd get a deal. Barbara Corcoran did not like us. She did not like our presence. And we ended up walking away with Mark Cuban and Lori Greiner, which was awesome. Again, really cool. So when you walk off the stage there, they literally grab you, scurry you off to another hotel from all the other entrepreneurs because they don't want you talking.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And then due diligence happens. So to your point, it still has to go through the checks and balances. They do a lot of it up front, but then each team, so Mark Cuban's team, Lori Greiner's team, they have to go through all the papers before it closes.
And do their own diligence. Man,
Correct.
That's really awesome. Yeah. I did like the startup accelerator thing for a while, and like people would be like, "Oh, like you should go on Shark Tank." I was like, "There's not a Shark Tank for Medtech. There's just not." Like, could you argue that there should be? Like, sure, but like, I don't think it'll ever happen. People in Medtech are too stuffy. Like, they're like, "Oh, we can't show our product." It's like we can't tell people how we do stuff. It's like you can, but I get it. Whatever. Like, if
we're in stealth mode,
dude. Yeah,
right.
Like that's the thing. It's like we're gonna be in stealth mode until we're ready to sell, and then we're gonna expect everyone to want to use our product and know about us and have brand recognition and brand equity. And it's like, nah, doesn't work like that.
Doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work like that. So I want to go back to kind of the Medtech go-to-market
Yeah.
side of things. So, I think I talked to Brent Lavin about, segmenting and positioning and, like how you're attacking your initial clientele or whatever in the go-to-market. And I think what we were, excuse me, when him and I were talking, it was very much like you're selling to a surgeon at a hospital type approach. So I'd love for you to unpack, how you guys thought, specifically about who you're targeting at these infusion centers, how you pick the infusion centers, how the infusion center ownership structure and kind of affiliations and things dictated some of that. Because I do think it's just the non-surgeon, non-hospital surgical procedure go to market. I think people could learn a lot from that.
Yeah. And it was a learning experience for us. And I think any startup is when you first go to market, you think you know how best to do it. And the reality is you're going to take a lot of pivots along the way because what worked at one startup doesn't necessarily translate to another. And for us, when we first started, we've always gone straight to surgeons, right? Like they are our champions. They're going to help move the process forward. And that's where this was a little different for us. It wasn't the oncologists. We found while they're very important in the process, they were more of, hey, we approve of this. Now you've got to go deal with Betty Jo, who's the cancer center director, or she's the lead nurse for the infusion center and the clinic. So we found ourselves really juggling who that decision maker was for a while. And then we really honed in on those early adopters. And early adopters are so key for all of us. And that is going back to where you have previous relationships. Who can get you in front of the right people? And that is how we got some of our first big names at Cooler Heads, was leveraging relationships to get our foot in the door. Mm-hmm. Right? So we could start. I mean, when I came to Cooler Heads, we had never treated our first patient. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, so on pins and needles, theoretically, through our FDA clearance, everything should work fine.
Yeah.
But we still needed to make sure that happened. And then once we got our foot in the door, okay, what does execution look like, Spencer, for a new product that you're really still trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together? So I would say that first 6 months is a huge learning. It still is today.
Yeah.
Almost 4 years in, but figuring out, okay, our decision makers are still really critical. It's not the people we thought initially, even though they're important. And just building off that and starting to develop our processes for selling.
Yeah. So like what did you guys, maybe what did you guys do first? And then like what ended up working? Cause like I'm thinking, there's probably a mix of, like I'm thinking like with dialysis care, there's like DaVita Clinic or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like they're the megalith. And then there's probably like 2 or 3 smaller than them. And then there's probably a huge mix of like, maybe it's like standalone, but kind of like facility affiliated or owned infusion centers and clinics. And then there's probably like maybe some just straight up physician owned ones or something, or that more, maybe they do some other things and they also like, so there's probably a strata of those that exist. And so like, did you guys try to pick off, like really target one group, go after like a whale or like a one-to-many relationship with like a larger, like they own 80 of these across XYZ? Was there geography focus? Like, I'm just really tactically curious, like what you guys tried first and what ended up working?
So we really leveraged previous relationships. So our first biggest account was UPMC. So we leveraged a relationship we had there. And then once we got in the door, we started to migrate out within UPMC. So again, different from just working in an OR, there's tons of infusion centers affiliated with UPMC. So how can we get our foot in? And then how can we go deeper within that account? So that was huge for us. Secondly, we also started with some of those private infusion centers, got our foot in the door, little less red tape, easier to get going faster. So that was great. I will tell you, even though our price point for our capital is a lot less than I've previously dealt with, we still have all the same red tape. We still have the same sales cycle. Our sales cycle is anywhere from 6 to 9 months to get a device in the door. So we still have to go through those checks and balances. But, once we got into those early adopters, then we started using those successes. We could start building patient stories that we could then share and pivot to these smaller, I will say, hospital infusion center, community infusion centers. And the more we started to get patient stories out or case studies, it was easier to walk in and say, here, look, it's working.
Yeah.
Because that is a problem with startups. Nobody recognizes our name. And so we're starting from scratch.
Yeah. There's kind of uniquely products that can do this. For the most part, like, the patient doesn't know what spine implant's being used or, go down the list, right? There's a lot of stuff where they just have no idea. But there are some things where like there is a role or potentially a role for the patient to like request it or access it or like especially around things that are maybe it's not the centerpiece of the care episode, but something that they would like to have used or that's helpful to them. Did you guys have that as a part of the strategy? Have you developed it as part of the strategy where people, marketing to people going through this and saying like, ask for this, right? And having that be, kind of like funnel attribution and kind of some of the top of funnel activity for you guys?
Yes, our patients have been huge advocates. We have gotten into a few facilities based on patients advocating for this service. Yeah. I will tell you, we have to be cautious because we found ourselves getting tons of patient inquiries and we're constantly saying no because we can't move through the process fast enough at an infusion center to get it in time for them to have treatment. So when a patient gets diagnosed, think in mind, let's talk about a breast cancer patient. They have everything stripped away from them within that first 30 days. And that also means they're kicking off into chemo. Sometimes they have chemo before surgery and that means they get diagnosed 5 days, they're in chemo.
Yeah, yeah.
But you still get those patients who are so passionate about why a facility needs to have scalp cooling, where they continue to advocate for us on the back end.
Yeah. And what about like, I'm almost thinking too, like navigation of like, hey, you've been diagnosed recently. Like we will help you find an infusion center that already has our stuff that you can use. Is that something that you guys?
We do that. So when a patient sends an inquiry, if we have something nearby, we will mention the facility. So there are patients who will switch facilities to go somewhere else because of scalp cooling. And you have to think when a facility loses that patient, think about how much money, like chemotherapy alone is probably $20,000. That's not including surgery, everything else that's associated with that.
You guys, I don't know, you may have this, but like you need to like find a cooler heads facility like map page. And it's like literally they just put in their address and then it's like finds them the closest 5 to them. Right. I'm just thinking to myself, like if I was diagnosed, like I like knowing that this stuff exists, like that's one of the first things I would look for is like, all right, what facilities could I go to for infusion, chemo infusion that I guess both would be like covered under my provider maybe, but I think the provider side and then they, but anyway, I know there's some nuance there because I know there's some people that do that, right? Like find a facility that does this thing.
You bring up an interesting topic and maybe something we could talk about right here. We don't like to put all the facilities listed on our website because we're very, I will say, private about those because we don't want to open camping ground for our competition. I will tell you, we have used our competition, their sites to basically go hunt. So we're a little private about that. And I'm open to hearing your thoughts because I see the patient side of it for sure. And then being a private startup who's trying to have some, extensive growth over the next few years, we hold our accounts pretty close.
Yeah. My initial 2 thoughts are, one, you could have it like gated with like the user has to like give you some level of information, right? And then you could have like you could require some level of access, right? If you wanted to do that, which like, could your competitor make up a fake person, fake name, fake email, blah, blah, blah? Like technically, sure, they probably could,
right?
But like there's ways around that. The second thing I would just say, like, and this is a broader point, is it's just a cost benefit, right? Like, is the benefit of, you having patients that are able to find and select cooler heads facilities, like, would that be like a net positive in terms of revenue for you guys versus the potential con or negative of your competitors being able to say, oh, well, we see their facilities that they're in, and so we're going to go after those facilities. I mean, and I don't know how mature the market is to some degree, you know what I mean? In terms of like, if there's 5,000 infusion clinics in the US, like how many are using some type of scalp cooling solution? Right. But I would think like if they've got a rep in Philly, right? Like that rep in Philly should be hitting the chemo infusion clinics in Philly. And whether you guys are there or not, to me, I'm kind of like, is that really giving them some edge?
Back to Medtech being this conservative space, right? Like there's everyone wants this level of mystique. And I still think it's something we can explore too, Spencer, especially as we've grown so much. We have a lot of traction. We have over, 100 and some sites going with cooler heads. I think where we find the most benefit is finding those facilities that have the high volume, right? Because that's where we're going to grow.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I'll be surprised if there was two realities. One, you had this map and one you didn't, right? Like I would be surprised if you didn't come out ahead on that revenue gambit. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
like they already went through this entire 6 to 9 month process of like working with you guys, whatever, et cetera. Like they understand the reimbursement. They've worked with your market access people. They have a process for them to then just full blown switch, and not just to a different product, but like I want to say the other ones are like different reimbursement models, fully different in terms of application, right? Like,
No, the other FDA cleared devices are under the same codes.
and they both have that like CapEx versus disposable element.
They do.
I don't know. I feel like the switching cost there, it would have to be such a big advantage for them to switch.
Right.
That I don't like, you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't like know that they would do it. You know what I'm saying? Like if it was just really substantially equivalent and like, I always like trying to steal things from the tech and B2B SaaS world and whatnot and kind of bring that into medtech growth strategies and tactics and stuff like that. You go to any startup SaaS company's website, like usually it's above the fold who we work with. And it's every single logo that they are willing to let them put on the website.
Right.
Because it creates social proof and it gives people confidence. Right. And like, yeah, every other competitor can go look at that. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's not like those competitors don't know where the infusion clinics are. They do. They should be hitting. So it's like, are they going to beat you in that business or not? Like you having a map about it? I don't know. Either way, you guys have been doing really, really good work. I mean, what's next for Cooler Heads? I know we're getting close to time here. So like, what's exciting you about 2026, the Cooler Heads? Like what's like kind of the long-term goal or vision for the company?
Yeah, it's every year has been super exciting, Spencer. When I came on, it was really family and friends. We raised a Series A, closed that early last year. By the end of this year, we'll be kicking off Series B in that process. We've added to our commercial team. We're adding to our engineering team. And it's really making sure we as an organization stay at the forefront of innovation, driving sales, and getting AMA out to the masses, right? I mean, we've got to show exponential growth, 100% or more growth each and every year. That's a challenge. But when you start to build a team together who has the same vision, we put the patients first, but we're all of the understanding and mind frame, we're pushing this product to get acquired. This company, we're looking for an acquisition at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for medtech founders or, sales leaders listening, like what do you think is the single biggest linchpin to go to market success? Like if you had to boil it down to one thing, say if you do this one thing really, really well, like you are putting yourself in the best position to have success.
Number one, there's no perfect time. You got to just jump in and start selling the product. And, you can't be afraid to start selling yourself. I think that's what I see, whether it's medtech or not. Even back when I created my product that was on Shark Tank, it's the hardest part is just getting started. Yeah. You could delay your launch over and over and over and over again, but you just got to get that first sell. When you get that first sell under your hat, you're off to the races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people try to develop like the end-all be-all product too quickly. Yeah. I think with medical device, it's like, you've got to do a letter to file or sometimes like a full new submission or whatever. So right. There's that, right? But I think getting your product in users' hands and used as quickly as possible, even if there's a feature or two that it may be missing or not have, or it's not as perfect as you'd like, is like the most important thing. That can be human factors, that can be cadaver labs, that can be, pre-clearance clinical trials, or that can be like, hey, we're just going to get our MVP through the FDA and get some users and then like immediately follow up with the Gen 2. You know what I mean? That we either do a letter to file or a new submission. I feel like so many device companies, they think that like their first generation product that they get through the FDA, like they view it as a finish line and not a mile marker. And they view like, well, we're just going to have our Gen 1 and we're going to launch that. And then we're going to make no changes and we're going to ride off into the sunset and someone's going to buy our company for $100 million. Like, I don't think it's ever happened, Courtney, that like the Gen 1 product that they got through the FDA was the thing that got them acquired. Like with no letter to files, no changes, no design change. Like it's just never happened. So if you know that, let's plan for it, right? Like
Right.
let's plan for there to be this iterative jump from the Gen 1 that we launch with. We learn so much. Now we build the Gen 2, get that cleared, or even just letter to file. Maybe it's a small design change. Like, I don't know what your thoughts on that are. And like, I guess if you guys had kind of Gen 1, Gen 2 shifts, right? Or maybe you're on Gen 3.
Oh my gosh. I mean, Spencer, back to you have to crawl, walk, run, which everybody doesn't want to go through those steps. It is imperative. Back to get out of the mindset of paralysis by analysis and just get going, because the lessons we have learned since day one, the modifications, the iterations we've had, just to the basic things have evolved unbelievably. And it's also prepared us for what's next or what's needed next in the product. There's never going to be any perfect product. That's just a reality. We're all going to have our hiccups, and we've got to learn how to be nimble and shift and adjust when needed.
Yep. Yeah, like we recently launched kind of end of last year on the kind of the Exo Medtech vendor side. We launched a product called Campaigns, and it was like we got basically just said, hey, we got to get this in users' hands. We want them using it, right?
Right.
So we got like our initial users, and I'm not kidding, Courtney. We've probably shipped, I'm not even going to count like tweaks, like small tweaks here and there.
Yeah.
We probably shipped like 7, 8 completely new features, like in like a 2 to 3 month period. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Different integrations, different things, like you name it. And then like there's literally been, it's a constantly evolving product, right?
Constantly.
You can do that with software, right? You should do that. You should be doing it with software. It's like people are like, oh, like, every time I open Zoom, it's got to do an update. Like when I opened the Riverside desktop app that we're recording this right now, I was like, oh, install the update to launch it. And like, that used to like bug me. It's like, oh, what are you talking? Like, but I get it. It's like, yeah, like they're making it better. Like they're fixing stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they're improving the experience for the user. So yeah, I wish more people in medtech like had that kind of that outlook of like, it also creates, I feel like if you just think that you're going to ride off in the sunset with the Gen 1, you almost have a mental framework of being like pot committed, and like you're defensive about things that users say and that the changes that they want. And then like you don't budget for it. So then you're like resource scarcity mode whenever it's like you're getting up against the wall of like, we should change this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I feel like even from like a psychological perspective, like having that, like we will evolve the product, it will get better. And we need to be like receptive to that feedback and seek it out from patients and customers, right? Versus like blinding yourself to it, right?
For sure. You touch on another important component that I also believe everybody needs to keep at the forefront, and that's customer service, right? That's what makes medtech so amazing. The companies that have excellent customer service, they also stay at the forefront.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're at time here, but Courtney, I want to give you the floor here at the end. Anything you want to talk about? Any words of encouragement about being bold, being confident? Anything you want to plug, whatever, floor is yours. And then I'll close us out after you.
Sure. Again, just thanks for having me, Spencer. I think if anything that I have learned through my journey is back to that, be bold, be confident, be you. The more that you can be confident with yourself, who you are, the uniqueness you bring to the forefront, that sets you apart in a very competitive space that we all live in. People see that, people respect that. And then people will start to be attracted to that, and keep that at the forefront when you're a leader from a leadership perspective. Empathy matters. Recognizing your people as people first, that will always go a long way.
People don't leave bad companies, they leave bad bosses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a saying around that. So no, I love that on the leadership piece. Like it's really, really true. And like that confidence is contagious, right? People gravitate to it, right? You create your own kind of like gravitational force whenever you like have confidence that's rooted in ability. You know what I mean? And
absolutely,
and stand on it. So, well, Courtney, this was really, really awesome. Like I frankly like didn't think we were even going to unpack it in the way that we did, like just the commercial element with cooler heads and selling to these types of facilities. But like I personally learned a ton out of this, and I know the audience did too. So like for everybody in the audience that stuck around for this whole thing, I know you learned a lot as well, but thank you for sticking around.
Thank you.
Courtney, thank you for coming on. We'll have to do this again sometime.
I would love it. And thanks for having me, Spencer.
Yep. Everybody take care. Thanks.
Bye.